Imagine being sworn into the Oval Office while almost the entire country thinks you're just a corrupt political hack. But then you leave office as one of the most respected leaders of your time. Today, we're unpacking the ultimate presidential paradox, Chester A. Arthur. His wild journey from a loyal machine politician to an independent statesman is seriously one of the most unexpected plot twists in American history. Here's how we're gonna break it all down today. We'll start with the machine politician, then move into an unexpected presidency. After that, we'll look at the champion of reform, dive into some controversial bills and acts, and wrap things up with a pretty shocking revelation, a fatal secret. All right, part one, the machine politician and the rise of a party loyalist. Let's get right into how he got so entangled in the gritty, bare-knuckled world of New York politics. So Arthur's climb was actually pretty steady. Born up in Vermont back in 1829 to a Northern Irish Baptist preacher, he graduated from Union College in 1848, spent some time teaching, and eventually practiced law in New York City. He married Ellen Nell Herndon in 1859, and together they had 3 kids. When the Civil War broke out, he actually stepped up as quartermaster general for the New York Volunteers. But you know the real game changer? That happened in 1871. President Ulysses S. Grant appointed Arthur as the collector of the Port of New York. I mean, this was a massively powerful gig at the Customs House that put some serious resources directly under his control. And honestly, the guy looked the part. Dignified, tall, handsome, rocking a clean-shaven chin with those very distinct side whiskers. He was known for being quite honorable in his personal life, too. But here's the catch. While he looked like a perfectly upstanding leader, his political methods, yeah, they were under constant fire from the reformers of the day. See, Arthur was a firm believer in something called the spoils system. Basically, this was a practice where a winning political party hands out government jobs to its supporters as a reward rather than, based on actual merit. And Arthur used this system to the absolute max, marshaling about 1,000 Customs House employees to work for Roscoe Conkling's stalwart Republican machine. But the political tides were shifting. Even though Arthur insisted he ran an honest Customs House, the reality was he kept way more employees on the payroll than he actually needed. Why? Simply because they were good party workers. He valued machine loyalty over government efficiency. And that fierce loyalty eventually led to his downfall when, in 1878, President Hayes fired him in a big push for reform. Which brings us to part two, an unexpected presidency. Let's look at how a truly tragic chain of events suddenly thrust this ousted loyalist straight into the highest office in the land. His path to the White House was, well, anything but normal. First off, his political boss, Roscoe Conkling, completely failed to secure Ulysses S. Grant's renomination at the 1880 Republican Convention. So, as a sort of messy compromise, the stalwart faction reluctantly accepted Arthur as the vice presidential nominee. He spent his brief time as VP basically backing Conkling in bitter patronage fights against the new president, James A. Garfield. But then, the unthinkable happened. President Garfield was assassinated. And just like that, Chester A. Arthur became the President of the United States. And compounding the immense crushing pressure of taking the oath under those circumstances, Arthur was privately carrying a tremendous amount of grief. Tragically, his wife Nell had died of pneumonia just a year earlier in 1880. She never even got to see him become president. He mourned her deeply throughout his entire time in office, which is why his sister, Mary, actually had to step in and serve as the White House hostess. Moving on to part 3, the champion of reform. And guys, this is the thrilling plot twist where Arthur basically defies his entire political history. Almost the minute he took over the presidency, Arthur was desperate to prove he was above dirty machine politics. He completely cut ties with his old cronies. He became this refined man of fashion, constantly seen mingling with the absolute elite of Washington, New York, and Newport. And let me tell you, this total lifestyle shift deeply alienated and infuriated the stalwart Republicans who had put him in power in the first place. Everyone's expectation was that he'd be the ultimate stalwart Republican machine loyalist. I mean, he was literally the poster boy for the spoils system. But the reality? He pulled a complete political 180. The former Customs House boss instantly morphed into a fiercely independent champion of civil service reform. Absolutely wild. Spurred by a massive public outcry after Garfield's assassination, Arthur really leaned on a stubborn Congress to pass the Pendleton Act of 1883. This act was basically the death knell for the spoils system. It established a bipartisan civil service commission, forbade the shady practice of levying political assessments on office holders, and created a classified system where government jobs were earned through competitive written exams. Basically, merit over loyalty. It even protected employees from being fired for political reasons. The ultimate machine politician had literally dismantled the machine. All right, part 4, controversial bills and acts. Let's dig into how his newfound independence played out in some of the most complex legislative battles of his presidency. Operating completely independently of party lines, Arthur took on some massive legislation. For instance, in 1883, he tried to lower tariff rates because the government was actually dealing with huge, embarrassing revenue surpluses. Congress didn't really play along, though. They raised about as many rates as they cut. Still, Arthur signed a compromise tariff act, which ended up pushing a lot of frustrated Westerners and Southerners right into the arms of the Democratic Party. Then there was the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882. He actually vetoed the first version of the bill, which would have banned Chinese laborers for 20 years, but he ended up signing the second iteration, which put a 10-year moratorium on Chinese immigration. The historical gravity of that legislation really cannot be overstated. The Chinese Exclusion Act marked the very first time the federal government explicitly prohibited a specific ethnic group from entering the U.S., entirely based on the perceived idea that they were a threat to the general population. It remains a deeply significant and heavily controversial piece of his legacy.
Which brings us to our fifth and final section, a fatal secret in the hidden struggle of his presidency.
Looking back at all of this, we really have to ask ourselves, what gave this career political hack the sudden, unshakable courage to abandon his party's dogma? Why did Arthur act with such fierce independence and singular conviction once he got into office? Well, the answer is profoundly tragic: Bright's disease. Just a year into his presidency, Arthur found out he was suffering from this fatal kidney condition. Knowing his days were numbered, he kept the diagnosis a strict secret from the American public. He even went through the motions of a token campaign for the 1884 presidential nomination, just so he wouldn't look like he was afraid of defeat. He didn't get the nomination, and he passed away on November 18, 1886. Publisher Alexander K. McClure said it best when he wrote, "No man ever entered the presidency so profoundly and widely distrusted, and no one ever retired more generally respected." It really is an incredible redemption arc, and it leaves us with something to think about. Knowing that Chester A. Arthur only dismantled the corrupt system that built him after he realized his time was running out, how much of our true, principled character is only revealed when we are faced with our own inevitable end?